Be talking about the opportunities India has in this trade war time and also the pandemic time, where the whole world is looking for the alternative country for the manufacturing or supply chain. So India has an opportunity, but let us see what exactly those are, how exactly the opportunities can be converted into the actual business. To know more about those realities, we have a guest with us, Bhumesh Vermaji with us. He is an attorney. He practices international law and contract law, and he is a managing partner at Legal Calm Corp in Delhi, and he has been and also a Chevening scholarship winner. And he went to UK and he studied, and he also practiced the law, international law, with very reputed firms overseas and in India. So, welcome to the show, Bhumesh Vermaji.
Thank you.
So, we would like to know a little bit about yourself. I mean, that way our audience will understand a little more. I mean, what your background, and that will be helpful. I did say something, but I'm going to elaborate. I really appreciate if you can elaborate a little more about yourself, please.
Well, I have been practicing on international corporate commercial laws for more than 25 years now, and we have had the opportunity to work with global who's who to bring them to India, to make them operational in India, holding their hand throughout, getting them government approvals, incorporating companies for them, negotiating joint ventures, technology transfers, and other commercial agreements for them, as well as helping Indian companies finding feet abroad. Last 10-15 years, the trend has been both ways. Like 30 years back, the trend was one-sided, maybe 98% incoming FDI and 2% outgoing. This matrix, the mix changed a few years after opening up of Indian economy in 1991. So we have also helped a lot of Indian companies going abroad. So I was engaged with some of the biggest Indian law firms for about 23 years of my career. 3 years back, I started my own boutique law firm by the name of Corpcom Legal, and here also we service HNIs, domestic companies and international companies on their corporate commercial mergers and acquisitions bit. I mean, we are a corporate focused firm, but yes, we do have capacity to provide them services when it comes to litigation, when it comes to IPR and other related practice verticals. So this is, I think, broadly sums up what we do. Apart from that, some greatness has been thrust upon me on the systems of educational institutions in terms of education as well. I happen to be guest faculty with various law and management institutes across the country, and my interest in writing has also resulted in some books as well as a few hundred articles online and in print and so on and so forth. And particularly my book on contract drafting skills is a prescribed textbook in law and management institutes as well.
So very nice. Thank you very much for your brief intro and also information about you. So we would like to start with we are curious to know about one point. So we have been talking about the opportunity right now India has, and also many companies are willing to come to India, but I mean they are not being materialized, and we hear that they have a lot of challenges. So can you help us out in understanding what kind of challenges international companies are facing in starting a company or starting operations in India?
Well,
from the legal perspective.
Right, yeah. Right. Well, every jurisdiction has its own challenges. There is no country or ecosystem in the world, I think, which is free of all problems. No one is 100% clear. But yes, there have been challenges because of the inherent maybe socialist or government control kind of environment we had for a better half of our history, independent history so far. But since the liberalization started in 1991, India has made significant progress in liberalizing, opening up its economy, streamlining the bureaucracy, and so on and so forth. Having said that, foreign companies majorly have been facing challenges in three, four, I would say, verticals. First one being labor laws. Our labor laws, most of them were drafted in again that socialist era of 1940s and 50s and 60s, and most of them are still prevailing. So these provisions have now become outdated in view of the new age economy, the gig economy, and so on and so forth, with the so much of workforce in IT industry and so on. So not only foreign investors but also domestic investors finding it daunting at times. They call it draconian at times, the labor laws, which have not been updated in certain areas. So we still have those old benchmarks in terms of salary and remuneration and definitions and so on and so forth. So many procedural aspects and so on and so forth. Second major aspect, I think, for foreign companies in particular is sometimes not having absolute clarity on the taxation provisions. Foreign companies accuse Indian government of not having very clear, transparent taxation system. Tax terrorism is a very I would say popular term as far as foreign investors are concerned. And we'll come to this, I think, in the second leg of our discussion as well. So particularly like GST still is being rationalized. There have been 1,000+ amendments in last 2.5 years, 3 years. So it's still a work in progress. After adoption of GST, it's still a work in progress. States have their own different kind of levies and so many things, even after adoption of GST. So taxation and particularly international transactions, direct transfers, indirect transfers, tax authorities have sometimes been arbitrary in their application. We all remember Vodafone case. So even if you are coming through, I would say, tax-friendly jurisdiction, which is perfectly legal, companies have faced these issues. I guess third issue has been bureaucracy, the famous red tape. Most of the other jurisdictions have moved to red carpet for foreign investors, but Indian bureaucracy still seems to be having a red tape instead of red carpet. So that is another apprehension of foreign investors while thinking of entering into India, because these images have been ingrained in their mind for last 60-70 years. Many of them are not aware of the changes that India has undergone, and this has been our endeavor. I mean, being a part of the legal and business fraternity, we have been holding meetings, workshops, breakfast meetings, and boot camps and webinars and so on to educate foreign investors about this is not what India is today. Another important aspect of concern for foreign investors has been difficult Indian partners. Sometimes some foreign investors have fallen into trap of not so good Indian partners, and there can be so many reasons attributed to a business failure. Sometimes it is genuine and sometimes it is not so genuine, the reason. But they sometimes feel that Indian entrepreneurs in their partnerships or collaborations are not as transparent or forthcoming as their counterparts in some other countries are. So these are broadly some of the major challenges which are more in the mind of a foreign investor rather than on the ground, I would say.
Gotcha. Okay, you brought in very good points. I mean, the labor laws and the taxation and also the partnership and a few other couple more topics. So, what are the steps the Indian government is taking to overcome these challenges? Are the worries? I mean, the foreign investors have to start a company in India. I mean, Mr. Modi ji and even the previous governments are also been, I mean, trying to work with the laws to attract the foreign investment in India. And this is the right time, and because of Modi ji and our government, I mean, they announced that they want to do the 5 trillion economy, and that is second topic now. I mean, right now they are made the basic economy itself and doldrums right now before even COVID, and on top of it we have the COVID right now. So what are the steps? And also we have an opportunity the other side. I mean, setting, I mean, very many foreign companies are looking for alternative country or a source for their supply chain, global supply chain. So what are the steps, I mean, government is taking to attract these investments in India?
Right. Now, yes, we are undergoing an unprecedented adversity, I would say, in terms of COVID-19, but adversities also bring opportunities along with them. I've held this all the time. So even without this adversity, the government has been progressively made changes in terms of cutting the red tape, making bureaucracy more accountable, reducing procedural requirements as far as company registration and getting approvals and so on is concerned. Most of the FDI, if you would notice, now comes through the automatic route. Now you do not require any prior government approval for FDI. Most of the industrial sectors have been put up for up to 100% FDI under the automatic route. So you only intimate the government of the investment. You do not require any prior approval for the FDI. Corporate tax rates have been reduced very significantly. Now our tax rates are comparable with any developed economy, I would say. Corporate tax rate is around 15% for new companies and after availing so many exemptions. So now this rate is very comparable to other developed jurisdictions. So that is no, I would say, excuse anymore for foreign companies not to invest in India because of the tax rates. GST, yes, it is work in progress, but frequent amendments also reflect the government's mindset to be receptive to the challenges from time to time. It is not a static government that, this is a problem, let this problem continue. The government is very dynamic and keeps changing the laws and procedures and processes as and when industry demands or the government analyzes it to be problematic. Labor laws also are being, I would say, liberalized or unshackled. From a 100% pro-labor stance, the government is moving to a more balanced approach. After COVID-19, so many state governments have also come up with deferment of labor laws for a particular period of time to provide more flexibility to employers. Many of the labor laws are being codified into a code. Implementation again is in process, but yes, the process is on and the government is very serious about labor reforms so that the employers and particularly foreign investors are not scared of Indian labor laws ecosystem. Indian government is also on a very ambitious move to promote self-reliance, what we are calling Atmanirbhar. So there will be more and more focus on local manufacturing rather than relying on imports. What maybe for very few luxury goods or something that we are not capable of producing with the kind of technology and environment and raw material that we have in India, only those products we may need to import. Otherwise, whatever we can produce in India, we should produce in India. This is the government's emphasis. And yes, you pointed out right, in view of COVID-19, there is a lot of discussion worldwide, particularly among manufacturing companies from China, Europe and USA to shift their manufacturing processes to India. Today, India provides, I think, one of the most attractive ecosystem for any foreign investor. With labor reforms, tax reforms, economic labor, such a big chunk of, I would say, middle class population, which is receptive to consumption of quality goods. Any foreign investor coming into India will have a ready market of 1.37 billion people, and out of these, at least one-third population belongs to the middle class, which is very, I would say, receptive to good quality products, which is aspirational, which doesn't mind spending. And so much of India is youthful. I think most half or more of our population is below 35. So there is no more attractive market for any foreign investor than to be in India. So yes, slowly but steadily, with or without COVID-19, government has been moving very progressively, liberalizing further and further. There has been almost no retrograde step, taking away any liberalization move back. Even for retail trading, government has been making very slow and steady steps in view of the, I would say, resistance from local small traders. But yes, there has been progress even in that regard. Insurance, defense, government is opening all sectors which are not so sensitive, I would say. I think we will come to the sensitive part now. You will not leave me without that, right?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned, you said the 100% FDI investment automatic route. But as you also mentioned in the last point, the sensitive topic. Recently we heard a news, India kind of stopping the investment of Chinese companies in India. How do you see that one? Is it a sensitive, more of what grounds or what the points they are bringing in restricting the Chinese companies investing in India?
Well, let me correct you a bit. It's not Chinese companies. It is companies coming from neighboring countries. So it includes.
Okay. Yes, gotcha.
I know where you're coming from. See,
yes, technically, gotcha.
Yes,
I agree with you.
Due to this COVID-19, India's ecosystem had a very, I would say, severe jolt initially. The stock markets fell about 40 odd %. You would have noticed, right? With the COVID situation getting serious enough in India, and that hit the investment sentiment very hard. The valuations of Indian companies, listed companies as well as unlisted companies, went down very drastically. Right. Now, before the government could take any remedial measures to, bring the economy up and so on and so forth, or the kind of package that Indian government launched after a few weeks of COVID-19 having set in, before government could take these steps, there was a sudden wave, or I would say apprehension at least, of opportunistic takeovers in view of the not so true valuation, the temporary setback that the Indian companies had in terms of fall in their valuation. Indian government and Indian industry were very apprehensive that it should not be that people having lots and pots of money should just get into India and acquire these companies, some of which may be in sensitive industry sectors. Now the Indian government, I was saying 5 minutes back, is very receptive to foreign investment, is very keen to get FDI and promote collaboration in terms of technology, know-how, and so on and so forth. We are not interested in, I would say, fly-by-night operators. We are looking for collaborators. We are not looking for investors only who would come in any point of time and go back any point of time. We want long-term, serious, sustainable, collaborative kind of investment, not opportunistic takeovers that today the valuations have gone down, you come and acquire any company. And as I was saying, that most of the investment has now been put up in automatic route. The government has no means to track where these investments are coming from. So we cannot allow any, what we used to call hot money or dirty money coming into India through round tripping or otherwise. And the government would have identified what are the likely sources of these investments, these opportunistic investments. So government issued press note 3 of 2020 to ring fence our vulnerable companies which are vulnerable to this peculiar situation. Investments from these countries are still allowed. There may be a misconception in people's mind that investments have been stopped. No, investments have not been stopped. They have been put under approval route from these countries. So if investments are genuine, make business sense, are on the basis of reasonable valuation, are not opportunistic in nature, are long-term, serious, committed, these investments may still be permitted. This was an, I would say, emergency measure to protect our vulnerable companies, so that it should not be that we are not aware, and so many of our companies have been taken over by corporates or countries which basically it's the sort of investment, the kind of money without proper KYC. We need good quality money. Today we are sitting with $500 billion of forex reserves. So we are not that desperate that we will allow any kind of money to get into India.
Gotcha.
So we just sanitized our ecosystem a bit by this.
I got it. I mean, I was not able to get the first-hand information, but I was able to figure out from the way the government was behaving. I mean, so they are, when they're not kind of attracting the Amazon and those kind of things. I understood that. I mean, they are looking for somebody who can stay there and improve the systems in India.
Yes.
Rather than just come there and try to take the advantage of the market, of availability of the market potential, and then and cash it and go away. But if you look at the actual reality, I mean, let us say the companies right now who will be coming to India, most of them have their operations in China, and they have a Chinese partner. I mean, most of them, they have the Chinese partners. So right now, I mean, even to be honest with you, let us say the Apple, if Apple has to come, Apple won't be coming as an Apple, I mean, to India. Apple will be coming through their partners in China. We kind of give a name that Apple is invested in India, but I don't think it's the actual Apple will be investing in India. It will be their Chinese partner in China will be coming to India and starting the manufacturing, because they are the one who know the manufacturing know-how, and they will establish. So how do we look those things in this, environment where the government is looking for the actual OEMs to come and establish, but whereas you will be getting only their partners to come in and then start the operations in India?
I guess the government will improve its systems of KYC on foreign investors even further, and will examine the nature and the source of investments that are coming in. And if any investment is genuine, it will be approved. Apart from these big brands coming directly or indirectly through China, even so many European companies which had their operations, manufacturing processes in China, they are very receptive to considering India. And I think Indian government is also setting up, even some state governments are setting up facilitation counters or committees to discuss, negotiate, and welcome foreign investment, genuine in nature, from these other countries as well. And I don't know how actually it is going to materialize, but we hear of a very good German footwear company trying to set up their base in Agra, the most prominent news that we've heard of a foreign company shifting its base to India.
Very nice.
So there could be some similar news in the coming days as well.
Gotcha. That's a good news to hear. And you said earlier, I mean, there's one more topic that, I mean, Indian government is focusing on like self-reliance, like Atmanirbhar initiative, and at the same time we are looking at attracting the foreign investment. So how is it going to be? How are they going to balance it out? I mean, this make it in India, or make in India, and also try to attract the foreign investment.
Right. Well, these two terms sound to be contradictory, but I think they are complementary. They supplement each other. India has a very big potential as far as manufacturing is concerned, and untapped potential is concerned for foreign companies for their goods and services in India. So one, we need, because we have a very young population which needs employment, particularly now even more than ever before. So we need companies which are, I would say, labor intensive, which provide employment. So for them, we need to cultivate an industrial culture. So we should have more and more industries in India, no doubt about that. At the same time, we do not have enough resources, I would say financial resources within India to even contemplate absorbing all of these people into productive employment. So yes, we welcome foreign investment, and from a foreign investor's perspective, where else do you get this economical labor, such a friendly democratic setup, very codified laws, liberalization, and this big a consumer market within India itself. So many foreign investors who come to India, I mean, I have facilitated so many in last 25 plus years. They do not have this big a market in their home country. Suzuki is not even under top 10 in Japan. And you see how it has performed in India in last 40 years.
True.
So Indian market is too big for any foreign investor. Who is bigger than India in terms of economy now? Only 4, 5, 6 economies in the world, isn't it?
Yes.
And who is bigger than India in terms of population? Only China. So where else do you get such big consumer market for your products and services? You can set up a manufacturing base in India, so that fulfills both the objectives, make in India, and as well as attracting. So it is a win-win situation for all. You can not only manufacture in India, you can also export from India, to entire South Asia and even further. So the manufacturing setup in India would be, I would say, more economical than setting it up anywhere in the world.
It's a good point. I mean, so you mentioned that, I mean, investors are looking at India as a friendly democratic country. But what I read in the articles is, I mean, the investors are leaning more towards the Vietnam right now because of their socialistic government in Vietnam, and because, I mean, they can, let us say, if the head of the country says something, it is going to happen. If you have an agreement with the head of the government, I mean, you can be assured that whatever you have agreed upon, I mean, those things will happen. Whereas in India, with the kind of setup we have, I mean, the challenge I mean, as we discussed in the first point, I mean, even though you agree at the Delhi level, when it comes to the Gujarat or even Andhra or Tamil Nadu, by the time it comes to the implementation, you have, as you said, I mean, red tapeism, and I mean the NGOs coming in between, and filing a lawsuit, and again the legal system. I mean, it takes years to clear in the legal system, and so with all these things, I mean, there's another point which we no doubt. I mean, the market has India has a very good market. I mean, none of the other countries can give the kind of market the foreign investor is looking for. But these are the other challenges we see before they get into the actual production and selling the products in India. Is my understanding right, or what do you say about those things?
No, yes, there are challenges. I would agree in part with you. Yes, there are challenges in terms of implementation of the good words that the government says at the central level or the state level. But yes, I mean, in their selfish interest, the state government and the central government will have to take a proactive approach, because today we require an investment climate more than ever before, because of so much of migration of poor laborers and so on and so forth. The economy has contracted so much in last 2-3 months. Even on a full year, I guess the Indian economy could contract up to 5% if the situation doesn't improve very soon. So today, I mean, we are living in a very uncertain time. So, if not for anything else, their selfish interest itself for providing employment to its residents, state governments will have to adhere to prudential norms and facilitate investment and investors. Unless you have an investor-friendly ecosystem in your state, no one will come to you. Where will your people get employment? And I hope and I pray all the NGOs, all the socialists, all the stakeholders, let good sense prevail, let all work, let all earn, let us have peace. Then only we can survive and grow. Otherwise, today may be a question of even survival of the poorest.
Gotcha. That's a very you shared very good points. I mean, on all aspects. So that is, if somebody wants to come into India, a company wants to come to India and start an operations in India. So what are the steps, I mean, involved in starting up, and where do they start, and how do they go about in setting up a company? I mean, let it be a small guy or a big company. Because I mean, there are two aspects. One is the big company coming in with lots of money and starting $1 billion, where you can go and meet the central government ministers and then do it, which is possible, makes sense. I mean, because you're bringing in such money and value to the country. But at the same time, there are many startup companies. Even though there are startup company in the US, I mean, I will come to startup in later part, but I mean, just bringing in the topic here. But they still would like to use the resources back in India and operations in India. So they do have an setup in India. So I'm talking from that perspective. I mean, what are the steps a foreign company should take to start operations in India, both big and small, if you can?
Right. Maybe there can be different steps and checks and balances for starting a new company or acquiring an existing company and so on. But some broad parameters we can discuss in terms of first step for a foreign company to get into India would be to have a proper market survey, whether there is adequate demand within India for its products and services, or export potential for its products and services from India, and so on and so forth. So a proper market survey, I think, is the first step in this direction. Thereafter, particularly if you are acquiring in an existing entity or you are entering into a joint venture with another Indian partner, you need to carry out a thorough due diligence over the target company and or your joint venture or technology collaborator in India. Thereafter, you assess the regulatory landscape for your project, what kind of approvals are required, whether the investment again is under automatic route or approval route, and so on and so forth, whether there is a limit on the percentage of foreign equity that is allowed in that particular industry segment or service segment, whether you actually have people in India who can be directors on the board of this company, what is the compliances attached to this sort of setup that you are going to work in, whether it is a public company, whether it is a private company, whether it is a startup, or you are making a venture capital investment or private equity, and so on and so forth, because there are a lot of pricing restrictions for an investor. So you have to adhere to pricing guidelines issued by the RBI. You cannot buy below a certain price and you cannot sell more than at a certain price. So whatever you may agree in your contracts with your partner or any potential investors, that I will buy at this price or I will sell after so many years at this price, as far as your exit rights are concerned, those may not work if they do not fall strictly within the parameters prescribed by the RBI. So these are some of the pitfalls that are there for any foreign investor. So you need to actually have good, I would say, accountants and lawyers to assist you in India if you want to get into India, operate in India, and maybe exit from India at an opportunity once you've made your profits. So exit rights and valuations are very important to negotiate and to understand how we stand, what is our exposure, and what is the downside for us. Any foreign investor should also insist on a very thorough, clear, transparent dispute resolution ecosystem in their contracts, because it is impregnable that you keep working in a relationship, be it commercial or personal, and there are no misunderstandings or differences or disputes at any stage. So you need to have a very clear-cut dispute resolution system. And in dispute resolution, I think agreeing on a proper governing law is very important, as to which courts will have jurisdiction to entertain any dispute in the matter, or which governing law, under which law will your disputes be entertained. Because this is a bone of contention. An Indian party would like Indian courts to be the competent courts to handle the disputes, and foreign companies may not have that much faith in Indian legal system, so to say, because of the inherent or perceived delays and so on and so forth. So most of the times, foreign party and Indian party, when they are entering into a contract, mostly they agree on an international arbitration at a neutral venue under some neutral code of procedure. So these are some of the basic aspects that a prospective foreign investor should be aware of. Srinivas, you are not audible. Maybe you muted yourself.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah. In our discussion earlier, we mentioned a couple of points, which is mergers and acquisitions and joint venture, and also the trust factor in the Indian partners. That's another thing which is a very important thing when you invest. So from those points of view, how are these mergers and acquisitions are working in India? Nowadays, it's been happening for quite a while. In India. I'm sure, with this COVID-19, and sure there will be more opportunities, even at the smaller companies level too. They will be looking for more investments and more partners. So how do you see the mergers and acquisitions in India? And what do you see, what are the legal steps involved? Legal precautions somebody should take?
Yes, mergers and acquisitions have been happening on a very rapid space in the last 3 decades, and we have observed that in cases where foreign investors have made proper due diligence, have conducted a proper market survey, have had no misconceptions about the Indian market or their joint venture partner or the target company, more or less they have succeeded in their acquisitions and even selling out at a good time. If there is a partnership between an Indian promoter and foreign promoter, I mean, there has to be a good sync between the approach, mindset, resources of the two parties at all times. I teach contracts and I teach how to negotiate contracts. So you need to have a give and take approach, a balancing approach. I mean, it cannot be a win and lose situation. You win and someone loses. It has to be a win-win situation. Then only any partnership or collaboration will work. And you need to have a long-term perspective. These, temporary ups and downs should not disturb your commitment to a partner or to a country or to a product or a service, and so on and so forth. So as long as you are long-term in the market and an ecosystem, there is an enhanced level of trust in your products and services in this particular jurisdiction. Everything works for you.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I mean, it looks like there is a video. Yeah. Is it okay now? I mean.
Yes, I can see myself very well.
Yeah, okay. But something the network wise, I see a little bit weak signal. Probably that might be the case where we get a faded image of you. I mean.
But I guess it should work as long as I'm audible.
Yeah, you're audible. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, please.
Sorry about that. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the contracts wise, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think you need to have an approach of a collaborator, not an investor only. So as long as you have that approach, you have long-term stake in an economy and in a partner, your M&A will work.
Gotcha. You're saying that, I mean, whoever is coming to India, they should have a long-term strategy rather than the short-term strategy. I mean, they should not look for the short-term gains and then walk away. Right. It's not going to happen.
If you have short-term mindset, then you invest in stock market, not in a company with a joint venture partner, or you don't acquire a company.
Gotcha.
Then you invest in stock exchange.
Gotcha. So in a typical cases, probably might have handled many cases. I mean, so what is the average time, I mean, where the investor is looking at the money back, the returns, see the returns of their investments? I mean, is it like any approximate time frame you've seen before?
I guess depends on investor to investor, but it differs from sector to sector as well. So we have seen investor trying to cash out after, say, 3 years in some sectors, 5 years, 7 years, and some ventures go in perpetuity. If the venture is doing well, is profitable, you are getting dividends, your valuation is going up, why would you cash out?
Gotcha. Okay. So and anywhere between starting from 3 years to, I mean, it can be long, 5 years, 10 years, even long time. Suzuki has been there for a long time.
Yes.
And that's the best example you mentioned earlier. Yes. Right. Okay. So from those points of view, which is nice. So at the same time, you mentioned about the trust factor. So how is it? I mean, why is that becoming an issue? Is it at the smaller level, or even the bigger companies also? Is it this similar issues at the large scale also, even at the larger scales?
The issues happen at small level, large level, everywhere actually. But I see the ecosystem improving now. Even Indian businesses are getting more professional in this regard. They are not looking for, angel investors, just making them overnight rich with the lack of commitment of the Indian partners' part and so on. Now they want to partake in the global growth story with foreign investors. So I see the ecosystem improving actually.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. So, yeah, and you also mentioned that, I mean, many Indian companies are also investing outside. So, how can you talk a little more about the Indians? Because, I mean, you need an RBA permission to take any money out of India to invest outside. I mean, earlier it used to be $25,000. I mean, my knowledge is not a correct one. I mean, it's a world of whatever I read in the past. So, can you help us out in understanding what is the scenario right now in India to invest from India to overseas?
Well, there are a couple of systems that work. Companies who are cash rich and are looking for capacity expansion, or having subsidiaries abroad, finding new markets, and so on and so forth, they can invest on the basis of their net worth and so on and so forth. So it depends on their, I would say, financial strength. RBI would examine that. In case of individuals, even they are allowed to invest under the liberalized remittance scheme. So every individual can invest up to a certain amount every year in foreign securities and foreign insurance policies and so on and so forth. So now these systems are available for corporates as well as individuals.
Yeah, okay. So there are some flexibilities in the way people spend from India to overseas.
Yes.
And we see a lot of people coming over to the foreign countries for their EB-5, investment immigration system. So we see a lot of things. A lot of promotion happening in the US, especially on the EB-5 category of investments. So that's a good thing. So I don't want to get into the EB-5 right now. Let us stick to this topic of the international law. And do you see the legal system in India is SCube? We did touch a little bit about a few times about the legal system being delaying the justice. So that's also hampering the growth. So what kind of reforms are coming up in the legal system to attract more investment, or also to help the growth what we are looking for?
Well, I think in the last 10 years in particular, we have made very good progress on the legal front as well. Courts are being computerized now everywhere. Everything is available online. There is a much better disposal rate in the court now. We have also seen that foreign investors invariably rely on arbitration. There is more, I would say, reliance on arbitration than courts nowadays. So a lot of load has gone off the courts. And we have seen, like even during this pandemic, courts have been very, I would say, tech receptive. And up to Supreme Court, judges are hearing urgent matters online. So I think we are moving in the right direction. And now that the need for adopting technology more in our legal system is being recognized, we should see much better days.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you very much for giving some inputs on that front too. And another thing is coming back to the startups. In India, as you mentioned earlier, when you look at starting a company, you will be looked at the policies are they're not in favor of the employer, but they are in the favor of employee. So when you are looking for an ambitious guy, or a young guy who wants to start a company, has an idea and you want to implement that idea and make a big dream out of it. So with the current laws, so it will be challenging for them to set up a company and follow the guidelines and compliance issues. So how is the government helping the startup? And when you are looking at the growth, and you should also support the startup companies, how is the environment for startup companies in India right now?
Well, the ecosystem for startup companies is getting better by the day. Company incorporation process has been simplified a lot. Startups get a lot of tax benefits. Startups also get dispensation from so many labor law regulations for initial years. Startups have been given a flexibility in, I would say, virtually every sphere of their operations. So maybe we can have a separate session on startups. Srinivas, if you find it conducive. The government
Sure.
is coming up with to top it all. There was so much of cloud over angel tax. Now government has come up with clarifications of that as well. There will be no angel tax provided your investment meet these parameters. So
Gotcha.
a lot of clarity has been brought about even in startup ecosystem, and but because startups have been hit the most by this COVID-19, and I expect further, I would say, boost by the government to the startup community in the coming months.
Yes, yeah, as you said, I mean, probably we will take your time and some other schedule appointment, and then do the another session for the startups alone. I would like to ask you one question. I mean, we have been talking about attracting the foreign investments and those things, like setting up the foreign companies, setting up the operations in India. No, but also with the benefits of they setting up the companies in India, we also have some liabilities. I mean, become recently we have seen one in the past like Bhopal, and another now recently we have seen one in Vizag, the gas leak. So how much are they liable? What are the precautions? What are the steps we have to protect the environment and the people from what are the measures we enforce from the government level with these foreign companies to make sure the environment is safe?
Well, whether you are a 100% Indian owned company or whether you are a company with foreign investment, the, I would say, responsibility and compliances that you have under the legal ecosystem are the same. So you better take all precautions that are prescribed, be extra cautious. I mean, what else can I say? I mean, rest will actually depend on what legal recourse does the company have, or do the employees have, or do the affected people have, or what stand, how strict a stand the government takes. In the present case, whatever happened is actually unfortunate, but that is beyond control at times. So the company will have to showcase whether they were actually compliant or whether there was some negligence on their part. So because ignorance of law is no excuse, negligence is no excuse, non-adherence is not an excuse. So you have to be compliant, and from a common man's perspective, if you are operating in a different country's ecosystem, like when we go abroad, aren't we more conscious about following the rules and regulations of that country? Sometimes, I mean, not very serious, not on a very serious note, but we take our own systems a bit casually. But whenever we go abroad, we take those systems more cautiously, isn't it?
I agree. I mean, we have unfortunately, yes.
Similar approach in India. They should be extra cautious.
Gotcha. That's a good point. So coming to the one more point, I mean, how during the COVID-19, there are many systems of kind of break, and I mean they. We have, how are the contracts being handled during the COVID-19? I mean, nobody is able to deliver lack of resources or because of the lockdown. So how are the international and local contracts are being handled during this COVID-19? I mean, let it be deliverable of services or money transactions. So how are they being handled right now?
To be candid with you, Srinivas, most of the queries we've handled in last 3 months have been on these issues only. Parties are unable to fulfill their commitments under contracts, be it supply of goods or services, or making payments, or transportation of goods, and so on and so forth. or employer-employee issues, and so on and so forth. So a lot depends on how you have drafted your contract, whether you have adequate protection under the force majeure clause in your contract or not. Because when I was teaching this for last 3-4 years, no one was bothered about reading the entire agreement carefully or drafting, paying adequate attention to each clause. Today everybody is realizing the importance of having a very foolproof force majeure clause. So parties are debating and discussing and so on and so forth. Many cases have gone in courts as well, where it is too much of urgency, and I guess we'll see a lot of disputes. But the parties which are understanding and accommodative are sitting across the table and even negotiating, because what is happening is unprecedented, unexpected, and unavoidable. No party had a hand in bringing about these circumstances. So whichever party is not able to fulfill its commitment, when the other party should be sympathetic to it, at least try to be sympathetic to it, trying to put itself in the shoes of the other party and try to understand, how we can balance a situation, particularly if the relation is to be maintained.
But
It's not a breakdown in your relationship. You have to see how you compromise.
okay, so I hear a few things in the news. The government is kind of giving a relaxation on the real estate contracts. So won't they are they not applicable to the business contracts too, or especially the landlord and tenant issues. You cannot evict. Even in the US, they have the clause during this pandemic time you cannot eviction. You cannot evict anybody from the houses because of non-payment of the rent. So are they not applicable to the business contracts too?
The government has been coming up with some directives, at local level, and for government contracts, this COVID-19 is being treated as a force majeure event, but there is no global diktat, so to say, absolving any party of its obligations under the contract. So you have to find your safeguard in your contracts itself, or under the contract act, or under negotiation with the other party.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you very much for all your time and inputs you've given us to our viewers. So do you have any message, or do you want to say something at the end?
Well, it's been a wonderful discussion with you, Srinivas, and I hope what we discussed was useful for the audience, and look forward to exchanging more notes with you from time to time on subjects that you may find relevant for your audience. Thank you so much for inviting me, and let's stay home, stay safe as much as possible, and let's hope for better days and better things to talk about.
Certainly. Thank you very much for coming out of the show, Mr. Bhumesh Verma ji. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.